Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update live stream, but it's not just going to be about the Ukraine war. It's going to be about everything in the world going on at the moment. It's your daily or almost daily random geopolitical news update from my good self. I am particularly excited today because I've reached my 49th year on this planet. And thank you for sharing my birthday with me. So I know I look considerably older than that, but the truth is I am actually a mere 49. So one of the ways I like spending my birthdays, just like I do actually Christmas days and all my holiday days and every day, is talking to you guys. So cheers, here's to you. Now, this video is actually sponsored. I've been really lucky to get some sponsorship for the channel, which is fantastic. You know, I'm really keen on that kind of stuff. And so we have our first advert on the channel, and it is actually, we are sponsored, ATP Geopolitics, by TikTok. So that's absolutely awesome. And as well, you know, I am particularly happy to use TikTok at every waking moment. I like to have sponsorship from just small independent companies, and I think TikTok is a perfect partner here. So anyway, there we go. That's I would show you what I'm trying to show you. It turns out that nothing is sharing at the moment. So maybe, yeah, that's the end of today's. I literally can't share anything. So that's literally the end of this live stream, as far as I can work out. I wonder why that is. Oh dear. StreamYard is having a puppy here, and I can't seem to share. No, there's nothing. I might have to end this stream and restart it again. What is happening? Oh dear. This is not good news, is it? Maybe if I just refresh this whole screen. Are people still there? Are you still there? Can I now finally do what I wanted to do? My goodness, I am back. Chrome appeared to have imploded. Hey, right, okay. Well, this has been an experience already. Happy birthday, me. Right, welcome back to the stream. Just, I think there was a Chrome implosion. When this is what happens when you have something like 406 tabs open on Chrome and then another 205 open on Edge. Anyway, I was talking about TikTok. So the richest man on earth owns X, Twitter. The second richest man on earth is about to be a major owner of TikTok. So that's Larry Ellison. He keeps switching places with Elon Musk in terms of the richest person on earth. And his son and Lachlan Murdoch and Rupert Murdoch, I think, are going to sit on the board of TikTok and determine its algorithm. The third richest man on earth owns Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. The fourth richest man on earth owns the Washington Post and Amazon Prime. And then you've got Rupert Murdoch and his family owning all of the media outlets that they own, etc., etc., etc. And we have heard that the United States is going to be involved in fact, I've lost that here as well with the close down. But we heard that the United States is going to be heavily involved in what TikTok looks like going forward, as China has, due to the congressional regulations that were put in place some time ago. China had to divest itself of, or ByteDance had to divest itself of its kind of ownership or its running of TikTok in the United States, and so that's why the present government has had to do what it's done now, except they didn't have to do it in the way they've done it, which looks to be to take TikTok into the GOP propaganda space. I'm sort of panning out here because everything has disappeared that I was going to show you. I was going to show you this, which is absolutely incredible. And I hope, yes, here it is. Finally, I have what I want to show you. So I'm all back. Everything's back. This is what I wanted to show you, which is absolutely staggering. Hopefully you can hear this.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. President, now that Americans will have operational control, do you want to see the algorithm suggest more MAGA-related content prioritized?
I always like MAGA-related. If I could, I'd make it 100% MAGA-related. It's actually a good question, but I would, yeah, if I could make it 100% MAGA, I would, but it's not going to work out that way, unfortunately. No, everyone's going to be treated fairly. Every group, every philosophy, every policy will be treated very fairly. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So, although he says, no, it's going to go the other way, we're going to treat it fairly, every philosophy will be blah, 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 blah. He said, I always like MAGA related. If I could, I'd make it 100% MAGA related. You can, and you've put in place a whole bunch of MAGA related people onto the board of TikTok who will be delivering the algorithm on behalf of the GOP, creating that algorithm for TikTok. Now, I don't know. I was speaking to my son last night because he uses TikTok a lot. One of my boys will, but both of them really do. And I was saying I'd be interested to see whether what the US is doing in terms of the board of TikTok, whether that will have any impact abroad in, say, the UK, or whether that is just going to be for the United States. I presume it'll just be for the United States. So TikTok could look very different in the US, where it favors GOP sources, and the algorithm ends up making TikTok look like a propaganda arm for the Republican Party over in the US. But I think it's pretty incredible there. Anyway, that was all a bit of a distorted start to this. So I am now going to get back on track and deliver you what I was going to talk about. So it all went wrong, and I do apologize. Thank you for sticking this out. Right, okay, we're going to start with the UN. And I say start. We're going to start with the UN, the meetings that took place, the speeches that took place to some degree. We're going to dip into some of them. And some of the claims that came out and statements that came out regarding the UN. Zelensky has said today that he's had important days in the US, that their team carried out more than 30 events in the US, including productive talks with Donald Trump. The International Crimea Platform Summit, held for the first time on a global stage, brought together representatives of more than 60 countries. Summit of the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children, convened at the leaders level. That gathered over 40 delegations participating there, and Ukraine, he says, is very grateful to every caring heart, to all the countries and leaders willing to help us. Thank you for supporting our children, warriors, and citizens. So this, I think, was a really useful opportunity for the Ukrainians to meet with the to meet with everyone, really. Obviously, to meet with the Americans, to meet with the Trump administration, or to meet with Trump himself. That was super useful. We've seen a 180 switch on Trump's approach to Ukraine. We'll talk a little bit about that. But Zelensky got to meet with a whole range of people, and these opportunities, I would say they're actually quite rare, but recently there have been a number of them, whether it be NATO summits, EU kind of meetings and summits, and all sorts going on. It seems that Zelensky spent quite a lot of time abroad, gathering momentum for support for Ukraine, influencing others. I think he's done a really good job at that. I think history will probably look quite kindly upon Zelensky and the work he's done internationally, which has been quite staggering. He's almost breathless. He does look exhausted these days. He does look a lot older. But these last 4 years will have taken their toll, because the man is just indefatigable, really, in his attempts to steer the narrative to support Ukraine. We've got a couple of snippets from this very revealing, I think, Axios interview that Zelensky did recently. Here we have him talking about Trump genuinely wanting Ukraine to win.
Are there any territorial concessions that you would agree in order to get a deal that ends the war? Or is this something that you say never?
No, we will never recognize these territories, which are temporarily occupied, like the territories of Russia. We can't do it.
Are there any?
So that's interesting. We'll never recognize territory. I think officially that there might be a difference between de jure recognition and de facto recognition. De facto being, well, yeah, obviously Russia are controlling those territories, so we kind of recognize that they control them. But from a legal standpoint, we're not going to recognize that. We're not going to recognize Russia controlling our territories. Now, the Wall Street Journal has reported that Trump has received details about a planned Ukrainian offensive that would require US intelligence support. More notably, they say Zelensky charmed the president. Once again, Wall Street Journal serves as a useful tool for Russian info ops, and Gabbard probably shared all info with her Russian friends, says Noel reports. But the point here, I think, is very pertinent, that Zelensky has probably changed his approach to Trump since the complete disaster in the White House in February, where he was ambushed by Trump and Vance. And interestingly, in fact, if I can find that now, interestingly, he has just been asked whether JD Vance is like his enemy, and he says no, he's not particularly my friend, but he basically needs to come to Ukraine, and he's invited JD Vance to Ukraine. But that was a disaster in February, and he's probably been coached on how to deal with Trump, and every meeting since then has been way more positive. And the idea that he's charmed Trump is, I think, significant here, and it bodes well for the future, that their relationship seems to be back on course. And then, of course, the whole idea that Trump had received intelligence either from the Ukrainians or his own American departments, or probably both, that put him in a position to properly understand the war. And that's what was behind him changing his mind. I mean, that was absolutely extraordinary. I've already talked about this, but it's an explicit admission that he didn't actually have a clue what was going on previously, and that's what a lot of people are saying. I've just got a couple of other snippets I think are worth dipping into from that Axios interview.
Not very long ago, said that, oh, you know, Mr. Zelensky, you don't have the cards.
Yeah.
So what changed?
What changed? I think the situation with Putin, his relationship with Putin, and I think that President Trump understood that Putin will not bring him success. Even if we will look at this moment like the society, American society, I think, which is very important for President of the United States, the support of society. And for any kind of leader, it's very important. And I think that society, really, American society doesn't respect and doesn't trust Putin. And mostly they doesn't trust that he wants to finish this war.
Now, what was super revealing about this is one sentence in there that was exactly in line with what I was saying the other day. So if you remember, I was saying that I think what has changed with Trump has been this understanding that by backing Putin and Russia, he won't be backing a winner. And he's just been giving enough information to change his understanding of who is most likely to win in any kind of way from this war. Trump will always back a winner. He doesn't care about morality. He doesn't care about politics. He doesn't care about geopolitical strategizing. He cares about winning. And if he gets enough information that suggests that Russia won't win, then he won't back Russia. It's as simple as that. And do you know what? That's exactly what Zelensky says here. So Zelensky says Trump realized Putin will not bring him success. That is the key to getting Trump on side. It's saying, look, I know you think Russia is a massive country and we can't win because Russia has 11 time zones. And I know you think their army is huge, but they're not huge. Here's why they're not huge. Here are the losses that they have had. Here are what they're doing in terms of conscription and mobilization. Here's what the economy is doing. Here are the canaries in a coal mine that are suffocating due to economic pressures. You know, this data point, this data point, this data point. Right. If you're going to back these guys, you are backing a loser. And if you back a loser, you won't be seen as the great person that you think you really are. So this is so freaking revealing. Trump realized Putin will not bring him success. And then he goes on to say, and he does pay attention to polls and he does pay attention to public support. And the public generally don't support Putin. Although the MAGA Republicans have a greater support for Putin and Russia than anyone else in the United States, that support isn't that great. And really, Trump, if you're being sensible about who you are going to aid in this war, or who rhetorically you are going to support, or who politically you're going to support, you'd be insane to support Russia. And I reckon that is one of the most revealing things that Zelensky has said in recent times.
So you think they're afraid? You think that NATO members are just afraid to do it because they afraid from the Russian response?
I think mostly, they of course, there are some, I know some leaders, they are not afraid, but mostly countries afraid. They're afraid is because I think that they are right that Russia is crazy.
So you think they're
I love this. And again, it's so, he's not speaking like a politician, because he's not a career politician. He's like, yeah, I know that some NATO leaders are afraid, and I know that some aren't. Some aren't afraid of what Russia are doing because they don't believe that Russia will follow through on their threats. But if if NATO shoots down planes or drones or whatever, then there are a lot of NATO leaders who are afraid that Russia will retaliate. And that's not surprising because because they are afraid due to Russia being crazy. Putin's insane, and that needs to be factored into how we understand responses. So anyway, I thought a couple of those snippets were worth dipping into there. Now, something else that Zelensky said during his UN speech, and at the UN building and whatnot with all his meetings. Europe cannot afford to lose Moldova too. Zelensky's warned amid rising Russian influence. Georgia is dependent on Russia, and for many, many years, Belarus has been moving toward dependence on Russia. Europe cannot afford to lose Moldova too. And there will be elections in 2 days' time in Moldova, and it is scary. It looks like Maya Sandu and a pro-EU party are just ahead, but the pro-Russian party are only just behind. And then there are two smaller parties who are pro-Russian as well. It is a really febrile atmosphere there, and Russia have their fingers in an awful lot of political pies in Moldova. Russian-controlled politicians, troll farms, cyber attacks, vote buying, the Kyiv Independent says, and coordinated violence as Moldovans will head to the polls this Sunday. Russia has doubled down on its long-standing aim to gain control of the country of 2.6 million people. They have spent something like $200 million, so it's claimed, on influencing Moldova, and the percentage of Moldova's GDP that $200 million is quite frightening. In relative terms, Russia's expenditure on interfering with Moldova's elections has been absolutely staggering. Now, then we see this. So these are pre-stamped ballots found in Chisinau, the capital of Moldova. Authorities discovered ballots already marked for a political bloc at the local print shop, evidence of a planned carousel voting scheme. So this is very, very worrying indeed. As I show here, the you can't really see. It's not. I've seen much clearer. Yeah, there's a clearer image. So they've already stamped the voting ballots. That is super, super worrying. Now, how this works is fraudsters give the first voter a pre-stamped ballot. They drop it in the box and secretly bring out their blank. The blank is stamped and passed on to the next voter, and the cycle repeats. I presume they just get rid of the votes that the actual voters fill in. Example, 50 real voters, 10 outside accomplices are feeding extra pre-stamped ballots. Each voter drops one ballot, brings out their blank, and results 60 ballots in a box, but only 50 voters sign in. Right, I see. Each person votes once, but organizers sneak in extra votes to boost their candidate. Right, I see. So that is a huge concern for those who are interested in democracy prevailing in Moldova, and Western ideals being having roots in Eastern Europe there. Now, Zelensky met an awful lot of people, including Brazil's Lula here. Now, this is one of those meetings Lula is one of those people that Zelensky really needs to get on side. So members of BRICS, but really important members of BRICS, are nations, and the leaders are the people that Zelensky needs in his sphere, on the Western sphere of influence. And I would argue the US and Europe need this as well. There is that economic connection due to mainly fertilizers and whatnot between, and also fuel, between Brazil and Russia, which means that there's some kind of economic dependency to a degree. And when we saw Lula at, what was it? Was it the BRICS meeting? No, I think it was out at the military parade in Beijing, in China. We saw Lula meet Putin and gave him a really warm hug, which is super worrying. Brazil is an economic powerhouse in the world, and they have influence. You do not want Brazil being, the beck and call of Russia and of Putin. So this would be, I was really surprised at some of the meetings that Zelensky had down for who he's going to see at the UN. For example, there was Mozambique and a Prince of Liechtenstein, and I was like, what's going on there? So there must be a method to the madness. There must be a reason for that, but I wonder what it was. But Brazil was one of them as well. And, Brazil would be at the top of my list if I was Zelensky, of who I'd want to meet. So here they're meeting, and Zelensky says, and, they did hug. it was a meaningful meeting with President Lula da Silva. I said de Lula, I meant da Silva. Lula da Silva. We talked about the main thing, always to achieve real peace for Ukraine. We want peace more than anyone. I'm ready to meet with the Russian side at the level of leaders, but Russia is not showing readiness. Told the president about the real situation on the front, Russia's manipulative attempts to portray military victories. Now, that's fascinating because I think that's what happened with the United States as well, which is if you listen to Russia, you're going to think that Russia are doing all this amazing stuff, but actually they're finding it very difficult. Although I have to say that the map is not looking good at the moment. Russia have made some fairly significant gains south of Pokrovsk and really across the front. But again, it depends who you listen to. I appreciate Brazil's readiness to play a role in the peace process, and I invited the president to visit Ukraine. Worth noting that both there and France, we're going to talk about this in a short while, you have had leaders that have been arrested and sentenced for crimes committed. So Jair Bolsonaro, the former autocratic leader, has now been sent down by the Supreme Court, and same with Nicolas Sarkozy in France. Now, you might, if you are sitting on one side of the political spectrum, you might think that's an attack on these leaders. But the reality is that's democracy doing the right thing. You are having leaders being held to account for stuff that they've done wrong and then going down for it. So I'm all for taking prominent leaders to task over their actions. They shouldn't be given carte blanche, and that Bolsonaro and Sarkozy have both been sentenced. One to, I think Bolsonaro is at 27 years, Sarkozy 5 years, and that was over Libya. I think that is a good sign for functioning democracies. And now, Marco Rubio's UN meeting with Lavrov showcased a major shift as he reiterated Trump's demand that Moscow stop the killing in Ukraine. This was yet another frustration for the Kremlin, coming just 24 hours after Trump had called Russia a paper tiger. This was to be expected. Marco Rubio seems to be a spineless jellyfish, whereby prior to 2024, November 2024, and really prior to actually January 2025, when he was made Secretary of State, he was very, very strong on Russia. He would have made, if he was running the show as a president of the United States, he would have made very, very different decisions from Trump. And you're expecting him to stand up to Trump to some degree, but he's become completely spineless. And he just follows whatever Trump says, but he's dying inside. You look into his eyes and you think, right, there's black holes now for your eyes because your entire moral being has been sucked away by your being a lackey of Trump. So it's completely unsurprising he'd come out and reiterate what Trump has kind of said, and it's up to Moscow to stop the killing. But that's probably Marco Rubio's core beliefs here coming through. Right. Okay. US President J.D. Vance has warned that here you could have another situation of kind of towing the Trumpian line here. J.D. Vance is not a fan of Zelensky. Zelensky's admitted that, and he's come out and been pretty critical of Ukraine a whole host of times. But now Trump's done that volte-face, that about turn, J.D. Vance, just like Marco Rubio, has had to follow suit.
The Ukraine. Look, I've answered a version of this question probably 100 times over the past 3 months. And one of the things I'll say about the president is that he is responsive to the reality on the ground. And the reality on the ground is that, number one, we have engaged in incredibly good faith negotiations with both the Russians and the Ukrainians. And I believe the president is growing incredibly impatient with the Russians right now because he doesn't feel like they're putting enough on the table to end the war. That's number one. Number two, the president has grown very confident that this war is bad for Russia. You hear me say this all the time. You hear the president say this all the time. The war is bad for Russia. It's bad for Ukraine. It's bad for America. We want the killing to stop. That remains the president's position. But the president also can look at reality on the ground. He sees the economic numbers that are coming out of Eastern Europe. He sees the number of dead people, both Russians and Ukrainians, that are happening in that war. And the president is telling Vladimir Putin it is time to stop the killing. He would say that to Zelensky. In fact, has said that to Zelensky. He wants this war to end, and he's doing everything that he can to stop it. But look, if the Russians refuse to negotiate in good faith, I think it's going to be very, very bad for their country. That's what the president made clear. It's not a shift in position. It's an acknowledgement of the reality on the ground. We're going to keep on fighting for peace every single day in the Trump administration.
I think it's both. It's an acknowledgement of what's going on the ground, and it's a shift in position because of that. And there is a meaningful shift in position. There really is, because there's a meaningful shift in rhetoric. There's an understanding of the reality on the ground where he didn't have that before. I think it's interesting that JD Vance there said, you know, always concentrate on the little things and how do they couch whatever they're saying. JD Vance talked about the economic numbers coming out of Eastern Europe. He didn't say Russia. Like, why would you do? Like, it's always giving Russia as much elbow room as possible. It's always a case of not criticizing Russia if you can get away with not criticizing Russia. If I don't have to use the word Russia, then I'll get away with not using that. So I'll say that, oh, the economic numbers coming out of Eastern Europe. Actually, no, Poland's economy is doing pretty well. Thank you very much. Hungary's numbers aren't doing very well, but I don't think you're really having to go at Hungary here. No, you're talking about Russia. Okay, why do you call Russia Eastern Europe? It's really, really bizarre. Anyway, you know, there is a slight change of positioning, I think, there from JD Vance as well to fall in line with Trump. Now, Zelensky said on Fox News, and again, very clever to go, you know, he wants to be your list of who you want to speak to, Brazil, this person, that person, you know, all of these key nation states and leaders, and then Fox News. I want to get on Fox News when I'm out in the States. Just as an aside here, I listened this morning, and I know this is all left-wing liberal, blah, 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 but I listened to Jimmy Kimmel and Seth Meyers, and both of them centered on escalator gate. And it is absolutely hilarious how Fox News and Newsmax and people, but particularly Fox News, have gone to town on escalator gate. And it's so embarrassing. So they both of them played these montages of different aspects of this. So one is the how strong and how masculine Trump is. And they played these montages of Fox News readers going, Trump is just the strongest, most masculine, like literally saying the most masculine president there's ever been. There used to be generals that were riding cavalry charges that became president of the United States. You're like, Trump, Captain Bone Spurs is more bloody masculine than these generals that became president. Anyway, so you had these montages of how masculine and strong, literally physically and health-wise strong Trump is. And then you had the escalator stopping at the UN, and there was a slight jerk forward. And honestly, you've got to watch Closer Look with Seth Meyers and the Jimmy Kimmel monologue, because they are hilarious, and hilarious in a very incisive way that shows you that Fox News really is a propaganda arm of the Republican Party, but more pertinently of Trump himself. And they were all of these excerpts from different Fox News readers saying this was horrible. If he wasn't holding on with his hands, like the sharp teeth of the escalator could have damaged him. And then Laura Ingraham was saying he froze just for a few seconds. Do you know how vulnerable he is to being like shot from, like, what, Trump's not allowed to stop? Like, basically the video is the escalator stopped, they went like that, and then Melania Trump kept walking and he walked up, and it just turned into a set of stairs. Wow, Trump walks upstairs. But they're going to town on this, saying, oh my goodness, how incredible it was that he managed to deal with a slight jerking on the escalator. It's like, hang on, you just spent the last couple of years telling us how freaking masculine and macho this guy is, and now you're saying how dangerous it is that an escalator stopped while he was on it. And if it wasn't for the fact that he was holding on so tightly with his hands, who knows what would have happened? Anyway, just the juxtaposition of those two positions is hilariously expressed by both Kimmel and Meyers. That I really would advise you go and watch them. It is like chef's kiss of showing you how pathetic Fox News, I think, really is. And I will say that they are pathetic in their, like, if you were watching some parody Sacha Baron Cohen film about dictators, like, that's how you would play the state TV news reporting something on a dictator in another country. Is that kind of fawning adulation over the most pathetic of things. And that's what's going on. So anyway, knowing that that's where they're at, Fox News is obviously where Zelensky wants to be. He said, quote, Iran will never be on Ukraine's side. India, for the most part, is with us. Ooh. Yes, energy ties with Russia remain an issue, but I believe Trump can handle this with Europe and build stronger ties. We must not push India away. They can still shift their stance on Russia's energy sector. More on that a little bit later. Right, okay. Zelensky met with King Gustav of Sweden. We spoke about Sweden's participation in Ukraine's reconstruction. We also discussed support of the school nutrition reform being implemented in Ukraine under the patronage of the First Lady Olena Zelenska. So again, there's a whole like smorgasbord of leaders that Zelensky met with that I find quite interesting. So they're very varied. One such leader was Ahmed al-Sharaa, the new leader of Syria. And of course, Syria. Now, again, this would be one of those countries. I would say Brazil, Syria, I mean, India, if you could, maybe South Africa. These would be the nations. Syria, because Russia has had such an important role to play in the history of Syria over the last 10 years. And the port of Tartus and the Khmeimim air base and other installations in Syria. Zelensky needs to know that Russia does not have a foothold in Syria. This is an important meeting. So it met with al-Sharaa as Ukraine and Syria officially restored diplomatic relations. It's just met with the leader of Papua New Guinea as well. Like just some really bizarre well, actually, that's not Zelensky. That was Andrei Sabiha. They've signed some kind of, I don't know, deal, but it's just, yeah, I guess everyone. And what's also worth noting, I'm sure you're probably saying this in the live chat now, but every nation has a vote on it in the UN, right? And so, you know, even when it comes to Papua New Guinea, like, what do you do in meeting Papua New Guinea? Well, actually, they get to vote. And their vote is almost as meaningful as everyone else's. I say almost because some people get to veto things. And that's what Alex understood. So the Finnish president did a really good speech at the UN. I've downloaded that speech and I'm just going to upload, just not me talking, just the speech later on tonight. So you can watch his speech. He talks about reform of the UN and how, you know, those individual country vetoes are not fit for purpose. And I completely agree. Now, he also met, again, Zelensky, this list of leaders who he's meeting, like, what are the reasons? Method to the madness. He met with the Panamanian leader here, long overdue. President Jose Raul Mulino, after meeting Zelensky, said they would cancel the registration of more than 200 tankers in Russia's shadow fleets. Because, of course, Panama, with the Panama Canal, has a very important maritime industry where they register, there are an awful lot of boats registered, ships registered in Panama. And that is for all sorts of fairly nefarious reasons, no doubt. But a lot of the Russian shadow fleet is associated with Panama. And so, you know, cancelling the registration of 200 tankers, that's a big outcome there. Now, here we talk about President Stubb of Finland. Russia has no right to continue its aggression on Ukraine. Israel has no right to violate international law in Palestine. States have no right to use Sudanese or Congolese territories for proxy wars. No single state should have a veto power. If a Security Council member violates the UN Charter, i.e. Russia, its voting rights should be suspended. Yes. And by the way, in the description below, there's a UN kick Russia out of UN petition. Please sign that. Please, all of you sign the petition below. That's really that's something that we can do. Then we have Stubb saying that no single state should have a veto power. And I believe that these changes at the top of the UN are necessary in order to maintain the UN's central role in international relations, and I fully agree there. Now, I was going to play you, because I'm now about 10 minutes behind due to the beginning of the video. I was going to play you the Bulwark's response to Trump's statements at the UN and also his Truth Social post. Tim Miller here says the Truth Social post doesn't actually show a change of policy. All it says is we're going to sell stuff. So that's definitely something I'd said previously. But yeah, they go to town on Trump's UN speech and just how batshit crazy it was. Really interesting this was brought up in Seth Meyers' piece in The Closer Look, where they went to France. He showed a clip of France 24. France 24 had a segment on how the UN speech by Trump was understood by international leaders and also by international media. And bear in mind that Trump said he had received really good reviews for his speech. In other words, Fox News, like Laura Ingraham said, it was the most pivotal speech she had ever heard. And Sean Hannity is saying it's one of the most important international diplomatic speeches and blah, blah, blah. Again, what you would expect if you had a state media outlet, right? If Fox News was tasked, that's what they'd be saying about Putin's speeches. Fox News is just propaganda. You just got to understand it. I know some of you will still watch Fox News, but I'm sorry, it is ostensibly Trumpian propaganda. Now, France 24 came out and said, well, and they kind of went to town on the speech, and they referenced this piece. So this, I think, was it front page from the Mirror. And now I know this is a left-wing tabloid in the UK, but I just love their phraseology here. World's most powerful man baby. Deranged in massive capital letters across the front page. Deranged, with a picture of Trump at the UN talking. And then the tagline, or the large font tagline, Trump rants to the UN about climate, migrants, Gaza, Sadiq Sharia, London, escalators, marble floors, and teleprompters. World's most powerful man baby. I love it. That is exactly how it was, and we need more news outlets to do things like that. Okay, so moving quietly on. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk warned that Trump's optimistic statement on Ukraine. So now we're going back to the True Social post that I've talked about so much. But this is a very pertinent point from Tusk. Trump's statement on Ukraine regarding its territory should be read carefully. He said the between the lines message in Trump's True Social post is less about US involvement and more about responsibility on Europe to end the war. The truth is better than illusions, Tusk wrote. So, yeah, it's good that we know the truth now, but the truth is that the US or Trump doesn't really want anything to do with the war anymore, and it's all on the EU's shoulders. And indeed, that is what you're hearing from Kaja Kallas. So here's Kaja Kallas. She is my secret crush, I think, in politics. Kaja Kallas on Ukraine to Politico. Trump was the one who promised to stop the killing, so it can't be on us. So she's recognizing what Donald Tusk is saying, that this is now all on Europe. She's saying, hang on, you promised to finish this in one day. You promised to be the one that's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize to solve this war in Ukraine. And in that True Social post, you say, well, with the support of the European Union, Ukraine can go on and win the war. In other words, I'm stepping back. It's all up to you guys now. So you are coming in good faith. You're offering all this so that Russia would come to the table, but they actually just escalate. This goodwill is abused by Putin. Just, really, really frustrating. So be warned that Truth Social post is, I think, a change of positioning, and it is more supportive of Ukraine, but it is also an off-ramp for Trump and the United States. There's no doubt about that. In fact, the Financial Times reports that European officials fear Trump is preparing to blame them if Ukraine fails in the war. Wow. Several European officials concluded that he is shifting responsibility for Ukraine's defense to European allies, expecting that it will be difficult for Europe to fulfill this. Absolutely 100% seems to be what the case is there. Okay, so that's now all that kind of UN stuff out the way. I'm going to get to some of your comments in just a second. We had Zelensky come out and say, I think it was in that Axios interview again, he came out and said, as part of this, talking about retaliation against Russia in terms of the airspace violations, etc., and then he's talking about having drones that can go 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers, and then he talks about how he said. He warned Russia and said, you need to start remembering how to use your bomb shelters or something like that in Moscow. To which Medvedev has had a meltdown. So here he is. Dmitry Medvedev, former leader of Russia, said the Kiev drug addict, i.e. Zelensky, because they always accuse him of being a cocaine addict, said the Kremlin should know where a bomb shelter is so its occupants can hide when he uses long-range American weapons. What the freak needs to know, what the freak needs to know is that Russia can use weapons a bomb shelter won't protect against. In other words, nuclear weapons. Americans should also keep this in mind. Again, huge nuclear saber rattling there, I think. Now, the NATO chief Anders Fogh Rasmussen has said the most efficient and least expensive way to guarantee the security of Ukraine would be to grant Ukraine membership in NATO. We should never, ever discuss NATO membership with Putin. It's not his business. It's a decision to be taken between Ukraine and NATO. 100%. And it's so frustrating that the US particularly still do not see a viable path for Ukraine to join NATO, when joining NATO, as I keep telling you, it's the cheapest way. And Rasmussen, the former NATO chief, should know this. It's the cheapest way to give security guarantees to Ukraine. Like, you don't have to pay anything to have Ukraine join NATO. They join NATO, you get their expertise. NATO becomes stronger. The expertise and experience of Ukraine is brought to bear in the NATO alliance. And then you have Article 5 to deter Russia from attacking Ukraine as a security guarantee. There's no, like, NATO allies don't have to then keep providing Ukraine with all sorts of equipment and then put their own 10,000 of their own troops in Ukraine as a security guarantee. You just like, we don't need to do that now because you've got Article 5. And if you attack Ukraine again, then we'll pile in on Russia. So it's obvious that the cheapest and most effective way to provide a security guarantee is for Ukraine to join NATO. And yet that's being vetoed by the US and indeed some others. We should never, ever discuss NATO membership with Putin. It's not his business. It's a decision to be taken between Ukraine and NATO. 100% agreement from me there. Right, Kaya Kallis again. I don't think that Slovakia and Hungary should be sanctioned for buying gas and oil from Russia, but they should find other ways to get energy, Kaya Kallis told Sky News. This is interesting. So this is a way of, this is, sorry, I was distracting myself. This is Kallis saying, look, I think if we sanction them, that would be too divisive in the EU. We'll be essentially having political war with Hungary and Slovakia. But there are other ways that we can get them to wean themselves off Russian hydrocarbons. And the US could be a really important influencer there. She believes that Hungary and Slovakia should really use the alternatives that their neighbors are offering them. Neighbors, immediate geographical neighbors, and then you can also argue, say, the United States. So it's the carrot rather than the stick, or just the alternative rather than the stick. Now, the US, as according to Energy Secretary Chris Wright, is fully prepared, as you can imagine they would be. And I wonder whether this is part of swaying Trump, which is to say that the Russian economy is tanking, the Russian military is tanking. They're not going to win. Plus, if you support Ukraine and support European unity in supporting Ukraine, then you can make some money off this. So he's recognized this in terms of weapon sales, and he's talked about a 10% surcharge put on weapons that they're selling. Like, you know, as if it wasn't obvious that you're not interested in morality anyway, that you are just going to be selling support to Ukraine. Now you're actually putting an extra surcharge on that. So you're selling support to Ukraine at your price gouging effectively, or anyway, that aside, it's also an opportunity to sell oil, or sell particularly LNG to Europe as the alternative. You say, you guys need to stop buying Russian hydrocarbons. Oh, by the way, do you know who provides hydrocarbons? Do you know where you can get some hydrocarbons from? Turns out from us. You need to stop doing that. You bad boys, stop doing that. And by the way, have a look at this. Very cheap, thank you. Or maybe not even cheap, maybe more expensive, but we're going to force you to stop doing that, so you buy our more expensive stuff. So there is this kind of rather, it leaves a bit of a horrible taste in my mouth, the idea that the US is profiteering quite overtly off the war now, with Trumpians' approach, with the Trump approach of not giving aid to Ukraine unless it's like intelligence, but that doesn't cost that much. Like satellites they're already up there, they're doing their things. It's not going to cost you huge amounts to give satellite intelligence to Ukraine. But when it comes to weapons, no, we're going to sell you that at a surcharge. And by the way, we're going to sell you all this energy. But you know, he's saying there are no excuses for Slovakia and Hungary, that they are fully prepared to replace Russian gas and oil product supplies to Europe starting today. Now, Trump says he'll meet EU officials to discuss halting Russian energy imports. Quote, Europe has to step it up. They can't be doing what they're doing. They're buying oil and gas from Russia while they're fighting Russia, the US president said. Now, of course, like you said that at the UN, but everyone knows that the people who are buying most of those hydrocarbons are Slovakia and Hungary. So Orban and Trump held a phone call a few hours ago. This was a couple of days ago now, discussing Ukraine and energy supplies for Central Europe, according to the Hungarian Foreign Minister, Peter Szijjártó. So now Trump has phoned Orban. You would expect Orban now to start meekly kind of follow, toe the party line. Turns out that Trump couldn't convince him. So Orban has snubbed Trump. Words I didn't expect to be writing anytime soon, said Tim White. The Hungarian leader, who is a darling of the conservative right in the US, is a darling of Trump and the Heritage Foundation. In fact, there are these huge overt connections between the Heritage Foundation and Hungary. And the Heritage Foundation has written Project 2025, which is a blueprint for the Trump administration. Hungarian leader says that they will not give up cheap Russian oil, despite the US president calling him today to discuss the issue. Budapest is not ready to comply with the US demand. Wow. Okay, so that's not good news for Europe weaning themselves off hydrocarbons. Hungarian Prime Minister Orban insists his country cannot abandon Russian energy, a warning that without it, quote, hundreds of thousands of families would be ruined, then GDP would drop 4%. He argues Hungary has no real alternatives to the Soviet-era pipelines. But then we also hear the EU will impose tariffs on Russian oil. So this could be a way around it. So Kaja Kallas was talking about, we're not going to sanction Hungary and Slovakia, but what they can do, I don't know how definite this is coming from a Polish news source, which I'm not going to pronounce. But Hungary and Slovakia would have to pay extra for buying oil. So it could be a case of, right, we're not going to sanction you, but we're going to make it that Russian oil and gas, or Russian oil in this case, will just become more expensive. So we're going to whack a tariff on it. And that means it's going to become more expensive for you. So you will be motivated to find an alternative that is cheaper. And then you can go and look at other oil alternatives. That could be a viable way to get the Slovakian and Hungarians off Russian oil. Now, India has asked the US to allow purchase, and this goes back to what Zelensky was saying, that actually India's kind of sort of with us. We just need to play them carefully. India has asked the US to allow the purchase of Iranian oil to offset Russian imports, Bloomberg reports. Whoa, what a dilemma this is. So on the one hand, the US wants to absolutely hammer Iran, so they're not making money to support their nuclear industry, for example, or nuclear programs. But the problem with certain approaches, like the Obama approach to Iran would have been more along the lines of, right, we need to welcome, and it's kind of like Merkel's approach to Russia. And I don't criticize her for this. I know many people do, but I think this is sensible. It just didn't work because Putin was Putin and he was misread. But the principle is fine of getting people to change their ideologies and their politics by inviting them into your group and globalizing them. So the idea with Putin was that if we bring Russia into the European fold, then, and when this is when Putin, this is going right back to the beginning of Putin's rule, where he was seen as this liberal, future liberal leader for Russia, that everyone's thinking he could be the guy that brings Russia from darkness into the light. But then as each successive year went by, it appeared that that was not the case. But you invite him in and get him to change. Well, with Iran, like if you just keep punishing Iran just to the hilt, then they just become a North Korea. And then North Korea just so isolated now, and they're so, but they're they're really dangerous, and they're getting tech and the ability to cause harm to other Western-looking nations. They're getting that help from these other ne'er-do-wells around them, from like the other bad guys. So if you hammer Iran so much with sanctions, then you will end up pushing them further and further away from you. At some point, you've got to welcome these countries in to say, right, we're going to start trading with you, and we're going to influence you through osmosis. But it's a risk, because you can end up giving them money and then doing trade with them, and then they end up still being complete bastards, as what happened with Russia. But it's clear, if you look at North Korea, if you go the other way, it doesn't work with North Korea. It didn't work with North Korea. So, like, what's the best way of bringing Iran around to being a democratic nation that's doing trade with everyone else, where we can have access to their natural resources and they can have access to our whatever, blah, 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 and they become just one of us? What's the most likely pathway for that outcome to come about? So India kind of has a point. Well, like, if you allow us to buy Iranian oil, you could argue that then that opens up trade routes, and you can try and influence Iran through other ways. Or that would allow India to be paying money into Iran for their nefarious activities. But this is interesting, because the US are going to say, well, who do we want to sell their hydrocarbons the least? Is it Russia? Do we want Russia to sell to India, or do we want Iran to sell to India? So that's pretty clever from India as well, saying, hey, mate, we won't buy Russian stuff, but knowing that they can get it really cheap from Iran, because Iran wants to sell their stuff, and they struggle to do so probably on the open market to some degree. So anyway, now, staying on India, the US is a major importer of Indian products, made of Russian oil. So this is an NPR article. I've talked about this previously. I'm not going to go into details, but it's rather rich that the US keep coming to places like the UN, or that Trump announces on TV and at rallies that, hey, Europe needs to stop buying Russian oil, and Europe needs to start putting tariffs on India and China because they are buying Russian oil. And yet the US is importing a bunch of Indian oil products that take their, that are made from Russian crude oil. It's just rank hypocrisy. So yeah, that is still an issue. Now, let's go from, I know India, but we were talking about Hungary and Slovakia. Bulgaria, on the other hand, as an EU NATO nation, will suspend the contracts for the use or transit of Russian natural gas by 2026, said the Bulgarian Prime Minister. Speaking to the Bulgarian news agency, he said that Sofia will also join the EU's decision of a complete exit from the Russian gas market by 2028. That is super important there. So they are, we have already secured supplies for October and November, and under very favorable conditions, here it comes, of the LNG from the USA. And our market is fully satisfied with natural gas at competitive prices. Interesting. So saying that actually LNG from the US is competitive. So Hungary and Slovakia can do it if they really, really want. Now, TVP World, so the Polish outlet here, saying Hungary is facing a major political crisis after revelations of a paedophilia scandal. In fact, one of Orban's, I don't know if it's a cabinet member or just an ally, political ally in parliament, just off the cuff came out with this statement about no one had accused him of anything, but like exonerating himself is it all like methinks the lady doth protest too much. So there's this scandal going on, a paedophilia scandal going on, allegedly covered up for years by Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government. The affair has shaken public opinion, damaged the ruling Fidesz party's approval rating, and raised questions about the future of Orban's administration. István Hegedűs, chairman of the Hungarian Europe Society, explained in an interview with TVP World. So we're not going to go into that, but just to let you know that there are a number, they've got corruption issues, now a paedophilia issue, and they've got just general moving away from looking towards the EU and looking towards Russia instead. All of these things are coming together to, I think, put wind behind the sails of the TIGE opposition party, headed by Peter Magyar. And if Orban fails to rig the elections, then you could see sweeping victories for the opposition in Hungary, and that would be absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. But the problem is, when you've got so much to lose, so he is so corrupt, Orban. His family now have these massive estates around Hungary. They're made gajillions of spondulis, essentially off the EU, through their corrupt practices. And as many people are pointing out, the US is looking exactly the same at the moment. The World Liberty Foundation and the crypto stuff that the Trump family is grifting off the Trump administration, all the money they're getting off him being in power, and Project 2025 taking all of their leafs out of the Orban book in getting the media on side, getting the judiciary on side, the unified executive theory, concentrating power. These are all the things that Orban has done since he's been in charge. And so I really do think they used Orban as the blueprint themselves, as the OG of leaders to write the blueprint for the Trump administration. But yeah, that grifting is something that the Orban administration has done for many years. Now, the EU is reportedly considering, although we've heard this how many times, moving to bypass Hungary's veto on the Russia sanctions. The Commission reportedly proposes shifting from unanimity to a qualified majority when renewing sanctions packages. I reported that about a year and a half ago. That is still being discussed as news on a daily basis. We'll freaking do it. Right, amid rising tensions, Poland has urged citizens to immediately leave Belarus. Poland's embassy, remember, they closed the border during the Zapad 2025 military exercises, and it cost China, of all places, an awful lot of money, as so much of their transported cargo goes through Belarus and into the EU. So Poland's embassy, I think they were losing $600,000 a day, China. Poland's embassy in Minsk called on Polish citizens to immediately leave Belarus on September the 25th amid rising tensions stemming from Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Quote, in the event of a drastic deterioration in the security situation, border closures or other unforeseen circumstances, evacuation may prove significantly more difficult or even impossible, the embassy said in a statement. Then you have Trump and Turkey. Turkey is obviously a NATO member, aspires to join the EU, but they don't seem to be trying too hard at the moment to do that, to finish doing that, because they've started. And like I've said to you many times before, they're the crossroads of north, south, east, west, Europe, Asia, Middle East, Africa, secularism, Islam, Christianity. They've got the Montreux Convention gives them the right to dictate who goes in and out of the Bosphorus Straits, in and out of the Black Sea during a war. They really control the Black Sea. And so Turkey are just massively, massively important. And they have a pretty huge military as well, and a lot of military expenditure. So Trump has said we can easily do a deal on F-35. So they've been wanting to buy F-35. They wanted to buy F-16s, and they weren't allowed to. Then they've just recently been allowed to buy F-16s, and that was a good bit of leverage there. And now Trump is talking about easily doing a deal on F-35s with Turkey, but Erdogan is going to do something for us first. Now, sounds a bit cryptic. I wonder what that might be. It could well be the deal that they've just done on both nuclear and other energy. So here, did Erdogan agree to stop buying Russian oil? Trump said, I don't want to say that, but if I wanted him to, he would. Interesting. So claims he's got that leverage over him. But the deal they have done is a $43 billion 20-year deal with the US to import 4 billion cubic meters of LNG that's 4 billion annually, starting in 2026. So again, the US is really taking advantage of their position with regard to the war in Ukraine and essentially forcing everyone to buy their LNG. Like, the bully wins here. Like, what you've got this weird situation where Trump is a bully, Putin is a bully. Putin is at the moment a genocidal bully in a way that Trump isn't, right? So Putin is the worst bully here out of the two. And so everyone's going, man, we need the US to help. We hate Russia. Let's stop supporting Russia and we're going to start supporting the US instead. And it's basically moving from one bully in a playground. You're paying your lunch money to one bully and the other bully comes along and says, hey, that guy sucks. And you're like, yeah, that guy does suck. You need to pay me instead. Well, you suck as well. Yeah, but I don't suck as much as that guy. Okay, fair enough. And that seems to be like, that's my pretty simplistic interpretation of what's going on. I'm not saying that the US is like that, but I'm saying that Trump is like that. And he is really strong arming everyone to buy his stuff. But of course, Americans are going to be like, yeah, he is. And it sucks that he's a bully, but he's our bully. And quite frankly, we're going to make loads of money off that. So thank you very much. So you're going to have a lot of Americans that are going to be super happy with what Trump is doing here. And I can kind of understand that. I mean, he is literally making people stop buying hydrocarbons from Russia so that they buy American hydrocarbons instead. Fair call. But wow, what about this? From what, like, this is incredible. This is what Trump said with Erdogan in the Oval Office, in that golden Oval Office.
Of Turkey. Unfairly, as it turns out. Rigged election, you know, he knows about rigged elections better than anybody. But when I was in exile.
I just want to know what Erdogan thinks about that. He knows about rigged elections more than anybody. What he's not talking about, like, Trump is not meaning he's had to overcome rigged elections because he's been ruling for how long? He's just imprisoned his freaking opposition leader, Erdogan. This is Mr. Rigged Elections. And Trump knows that, evidently. And Trump's like, yeah, I love this guy. He's like, it's almost like that is a badge of honor. Like, Trump is not insulting him. He's like, he knows more about rigged elections than anyone. And that's not an insult because, by the way, I want to rig my elections. I'm gonna copy what he's done. You know, I'm going to put in my political opponents. I wonder what's happened in the last. Can you guys? It is a quiz. Tell me what's happened in the last 24 hours in the United States, whereby a political opponent might well be put in prison. That's a quiz for you. First person who answers correctly gets 1 million spondoolies. Asterisk, spondoolies aren't real things. So I'm going to make them up and they are abstract. I'm going to give you 1 million of them. So, Comey, thank you very much. Joseph Rogers wins today's quiz. Who's he just gone to town on? The former FBI boss, a political opponent. Sees him as a political opponent. All to do with actually influence, Russian influence in the American election, blah, blah, blah. So when you got Trump saying this guy rigs elections, he's just arrested his opposition leader. You know, that's not an insult. It's like, yeah, it's awesome. I want to do that. And do you know what? I'm just going through the motions of arresting James Comey on a completely ridiculous set of trumped up charges. Anyway, I just thought that's fascinating because, you know, that is pretty insulting for a leader in a nominally democratic country. I mean, it's supposedly democratic, but I mean, there is a crackdown on media and there is a crackdown on the judiciary. You know, Turkey and Hungary, fairly similar approaches to democracy there. And that appears to be where the United States is going at the moment. I'm going to be that person sitting on that desk with the notice out front saying, prove me wrong. And the meme, prove me wrong. Because it looks like the US is going in that direction. Then there was this, like, wow. So, you know, I've said before that I think Trump is too old. He's too stupid. He is genuinely ignorant. He doesn't know about stuff. He's just admitted he didn't know anything about Ukraine and Russia accurate before because he's just changed his position on that on account of being told actual truth. So Trump is just deeply, deeply ignorant. He keeps talking about the war between Azerbaijan and Albania. No, it's Azerbaijan and Armenia. And he hasn't just done that once. He's done that at least 3 times, possibly more. He then talked the other day about the war between Azerbaijan, between Armenia. So he then didn't call it Albania, he called it Armenia, and the war between Armenia and Cambodia. And you're like, what are you talking about, you insane moron? And then you've got this.
A few months ago, you met with Aliyev and Pashinyan. Can you follow up?
So where?
You met with Aliyev and Pashinyan, Azerbaijan President Aliyev and Pashinyan. Can you follow up on what you want to say about current process?
No, I can't.
First of all, it's like, yeah, a few months ago you met with Aliyev and Pashinyan. So, like, if you're a world leader that knows what you're on about, you would know who they are. Like, he should know their names, but he clearly, I would say, clearly doesn't know their names. It's like, where? No, Aliyev and Pashinyan, like the presidents of Azerbaijan and Armenia. Can you follow up on this? No, I can't. Do you know why? Because I don't really know anything about it. Hang on, you said you just solved that war. You must know a lot about it because you solved the war. I mean, this incredibly complex geopolitical wrangle, this Gordian knot of politics, you sliced through that with your sword. Yeah. I wasn't looking. I don't know who you're talking about. I don't understand these places. I just invite them to the White House, get them to sign something and say, I've solved the war. I've solved the war and 7 other wars. And in fact, 11 wars if you include pre-wars that I've solved. You know, the wars between Albania and Cambodia. I solved that. That was me, that. Whoop, whoop. Albania, Cambodia, apparently they've been fighting for 37,000 years. In fact, they were fighting before the Fertile Crescent was one of the crucibles of agriculture. You know, before we even created agriculture, they were at war. Albania and Cambodia. It's been that long. Anyway, whatever. I solved it. Yeah. Is there anything else you can add to that? You know, what further? No, I can't. No. Because I don't know what you're talking about and where you're talking about. So, French president being found guilty for stuff to do with Gaddafi and Libya, sentenced 5 years in prison. Here's a fun fact for you. Last night, I watched 13 hours, the secret story of the Benghazi troops or whatever it is. It was a story, John Krasinski and a few others. Really good, kind of well-constructed, is a typical Michael Bay film, but well-constructed action film about what happened in Benghazi back in 2012 from a kind of military contractor's point of view. And I wanted to, and I watch it with my son Oscar because I'm trying to get him to watch films that are also learning opportunities. So we've watched a few warship films recently. The Siege of Jadotville, which is about the Irish UN peacekeepers back in, was it Congo, in the 1960s, I think. So that was a learning opportunity. Then we watched, just the other day, we watched 6 Days, which was the Jamie Bell film about the Iranian embassy in London and what happened there when that was under siege for 6 days. Then we watched the 13 hours Benghazi. So it's okay, if you're going to watch a war film, let's try and have something that presents a bit of a learning opportunity. You're 15, let's learn about the world. Like, rather than you just learn all your shit from TikTok, let's watch a film together. So anyway, this is just a really good film. But just talking about Gaddafi, because the context of that was obviously the overthrow of the Gaddafi government and the chaos that then ensued, and what happened in Benghazi. Anyway, I thought it was a really good film. So there you go. Second time I've seen it, but yeah. Right. Anyway, Sarkozy's going down for 5 years. Boris Johnson here saying some pretty interesting things, which are worthy of note.
I have confidence in the Conservatives, and I have confidence in the energy and combativeness of Kemi.
But the public don't seem to
They
be.
not.
The public don't seem to agree
Well,
with you right
let's
now.
see.
So this is, sorry, the context of this is that Boris Johnson's a former prime minister for the UK, and therefore leader of the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party at the moment have been destroyed, both in the election but also in polling at the moment. They are not in a good way. Labour are not in a good way in the polls either, by the way. And Reform UK, as a populist party, and Nigel Farage have just stormed it, absolutely stormed it. Although, interestingly, they're starting to get negative press now. And some of the things that he has proposed have been a bit crazy, Reform. And so they have just gone down in the polls, Reform. And some people are saying that Reform UK have reached their peak. And now that it's going to be more of a struggle for them. So anyway, Boris Johnson's being questioned about the predicament that the Conservative Party is in, because they've got to work out whether they are going to be Reform 2.0, go to the far right populism, I would argue, or whether they go to old school centre right conservatism. But either way, they're going to be hit. So if they go to the right, they'll lose their centre right people to the Lib Dems. And if they go to the centre, they'll lose their people, their populist right to Reform. Right. So either there's no winning here unless they merge with Reform. And there are some people who would advocate them to merge. This is what Boris Johnson's responding to. But we're going to be getting to Russia as well.
Let's see.
But Farage is quite an operator, though, isn't he?
I think. Well, you know, my concerns, as I say, and they're serious concerns, are about the approach to the economy of the Reform Party and the approach on national security. And I think both of those will be severely tested in the years ahead, and people will actually want serious answers. And I think that the answers are going to be Conservative answers.
So Farage is either a joke or a threat to national security, or both. Which one is it?
I think, as I say, I think there are two real priorities for us now. The number one is the economy, and making sure that we shrink the size of the state public spending.
It's not a question I asked, but is Nigel Farage a threat?
And the second,
You're saying it's a threat to national security.
the second is defense and national security, and the threat of Russia. And on both of those, I have very serious anxieties.
And Nigel Farage is a threat.
So what Johnson is saying is that Nigel Farage is a threat to both the economy and to international diplomacy vis-a-vis Russia.
I have serious anxieties. I'm putting it in Diplo speak, right? I have serious anxieties.
You're a former journalist. I want it as an intro, not diplomatic waffle.
I think look at what's happening in Moldova, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at what's happening in Estonia, in Poland, even in Denmark today, right? And ask yourself, do you want the UK either to be led by Labour, who have a huge number of their grassroots who are still basically pro-Moscow, Corbynista, right?
Which is not true anymore. So anyone that the Corbynistas are leaving to join Jeremy Corbyn's new party called Your Party, which have had, 800,000, although there's been an absolute disaster in how that has happened. And it seems there's already a split between Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn. But anyway, like that is scaremongering. That is not true. And you know, the stats will bear that out.
Do you want this reform gang who are on record as saying that NATO provoked Putin's aggression? I don't think that's I think what the world wants to save the West. What the world needs is UK leadership on this, and they need the UK to be strong and determined, and not to sound equivocal, morally equivocal about transparent evil like invading Ukraine.
And that's pretty well said in the main. I saw some interesting, and this is going to sound really pro-Labour, but it's not actually. Listen very carefully to what I say, because this has come from Conservatives. So who said it? Was it Jeremy Hunt that said this, or some? Anyway, but other people have said this. Like, you, as in the general UK public, you should want Labour to succeed in this electoral cycle, in this parliamentary cycle. The average British person, a not reform voter, should absolutely want the complete success of the Labour government, because if Labour do not succeed in running this country well for the next 3 years, it will be a reform government thereafter. And you've got Conservatives who've been saying this. Conservatives have been absolutely rinsed. They're hoping to come back, but the threat is that they would, if they can't come back, and I don't think they can, they're just not looking viable. Reform have destroyed Conservatives. It's then up to Labour to rule well, because if Labour don't do a good job, Reform come in and they'll be much more likely to be pro-Russia, and they're much more likely to tear up the government and screw the economy. And that's according to both, Boris Johnson agrees with that last part, that's what Reform will do, but he wouldn't advocate for supporting Labour. He's advocating for supporting Conservatives. But those other people who are analysts are looking at this saying, people should not be afraid to say, we want the Labour government to succeed. We should be saying it anyway. You should say that you want your own government to succeed no matter who they are. You want them to succeed because you want the country to get better. But we live in these very partisan bubbles where we almost want our country to fail if if the other guys are running it. Do you know what I mean? But I think that's a really interesting idea, that if Labour fail in the next 3 years, Reform get in. And if Reform get in, they are not looking good on a number of metrics. Okay, right. Just be warned. Daily Telegraph, for example, here's an example of how we should be wary when certain people get to be platformed by certain media outlets. The Daily Telegraph so they have a team at the Ukraine, the latest podcast, that are really pro-Ukraine, but they keep letting people write articles that are not good for Ukraine. And then you have people like Owen Matthews that seem to be writing worse and worse things for Ukraine. Anyway, the other day, the Telegraph allowed Rebecca Kerfler to write a piece. Putin has and this piece did the rounds. Loads of people are like, oh, look what the Telegraph has said. Putin has his finger on a nuclear trigger. The risk of accident is enormous. In other words, we should kowtow to what Putin wants, because otherwise he'll send off his nuclear missiles. But it turns out the person that wrote that is just like a pro-Russian advocate. So a few days ago, the Daily Telegraph gave the Russian-born analyst a platform. Today, she tells Europe to stand down against the mighty Russian threat, including Putin's warm and ready nuclear furnace. Be very careful where you get your news from, people. We are at war. Jonathan Fink here, OMG, we are literally desperate to be reflexively controlled by Russia. It's utterly pathetic. Dimko Zhluktenko, propaganda masquerading as some respected PhD author, insane, so on and so forth. You've got, lots of people worried about this. So Rebecca Kerfler, who writes in the Telegraph, is now saying online, what is going on with Team Trump? NBC News, Trump says he now thinks Ukraine can win back all of its territory taken by Russia. Delusional statement. Rebecca's intel briefing for POTUS free of charge. So here is someone who writes for the Daily Telegraph, saying, one, even if the entire Europe rises to defend Ukraine for real, which they will not, but for argument's sake, if they will, Russia holds massive advantage in combat potential in the size of the armed forces alone. That is just bollocks, by the way. Like, honestly, if the EU or NATO decided to properly go against Russia, I think they'd make mincemeat of Russia. If you're allowing nuclear missiles to be in the mix, then it gets a bit different, right? But without nukes, conventional forces of the Russians have been really degraded. I just don't think that's true. 2, out of 44 to 47, depending on how you count European countries, only 10 have both standing armies and mandatory military conscription. 3, total combined active military personnel in Europe is approximately 268,500 versus Russia's 1.5 million active duty troops as of 1st of December 2024, when Putin's latest decree took effect. Total armed forces for Russia is 2.38 million. 4, Russia has always and will always fight the war of attrition. It's what Russia has done for centuries. 5, if Trump deploys forces into the theater, Putin has a nuclear furnace warm and ready. 6, have some common sense. The Russians love math. Math doesn't lie, even if Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN do. Don't let people like that write in your newspaper, is what I would say. And just that's a warning there. Now, Elliot Higgins here talking about, so he's big about disinformation, disordered discourse. I've interviewed him before. It's a fascinating interview. Please check it out. It's one of these evergreen ones that you can watch now and it's still relevant. He says Russia's disinformation campaign continues, and having expanded onto Truth Social, so now apparently there are lots of bots on Truth Social, with Charlie Kirk's death, they're now making content for Truth Social that's all Charlie Kirk related and pushes buttons related to the LGBTQ plus community and Ukrainian refugees. Just be warned that, you know, Russia are very, very good at doing disinformation. And the return on investment for social media influence and media influence is insane. They are the best in the world. And here we can see that take hold. I think at least some of this percentage comes down to what we've just been talking about. So this is the latest polling for the AfD, well, for all the parties in Germany. Now, CDU, I don't know how accurate this is. This is NDR, and I don't know if other polls have shown differently, because I thought the CDU were actually doing a little better than they were before. These are the guys that are now in charge. Well, they're in coalition with the SDP. It used to SPD. It used to be the SPD along with the Greens and with the Liberals, but the Liberals are now nowhere to be seen. That was called they were yellow. That was a traffic light coalition. SPD and the Greens have both been hit recently, but actually the SPD are now above CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, or the CSU. These guys, according to this poll, only on 13%. AfD on 38%, and these guys are pro-Russian. Although Alice Weidel did say something that was slightly critical of Russia the other day. But then you got the Linke here. There's this left-wing party. Now, they aren't pro-Russia, but this left-wing party, Sarah Wagenknecht's party, BSW, is pro-Russia and anti-Ukraine. The Greens are very pro-Europe and actually, they're quite hawkish, weirdly. They've been really positive for Ukraine. So SPD have been positive for Ukraine, but they have historical connections through, you know, left-wing connections to communism. So some of their, Gerhard Schröder and other people, but generally they are pro-Ukraine. And, you know, their previous leader was pretty good for Ukraine, but could have been stronger. Friedrich Merz has come in. He's been really strong. But then you got the AfD and BSW taking out together. That's 45%. That's a super worry. Now, the poll is from East Germany. Here we go. Thank you. I've been corrected. I thought this was okay. You've probably already said that in the side there. Right. This is a state poll. That makes a lot more sense. So this is from Eastern German state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which is, so Eastern Germany is very much more AfD. But you see, that is a worry as well, because you're getting if you look at the electoral map in Germany, it just looks like an East-West divide, where the Eastern Germany is kind of doing the whole, like, let's rejoin Russia. Let's rejoin the Soviet Union type thing. I think it's super worrying, and there's a lot of purchase in Eastern Germany. So I'm sorry I misinterpreted that originally, as indeed did Jay in Kiev here. So that's a really good community note at the end there. Apologies, but still a real worry. Still a real worry. I think the influence that Russia has in German politics, in Hungarian politics, and we're going to soon find out how much influence they've had in Moldovan politics. Okay, we're coming on towards the end now. So before I get there, let's, on my birthday day, just read out some of your wonderful well wishes. Thank you, Johnny Negregard. I really appreciate you, matey. Thank you very much. We have some Norwegian love, some Who's Poppin' love. A TikTok is a hack of all pro-Ukrainian YouTubers complete. The TikTok hack. So that was me losing my voice earlier, going offline. I was hacked by TikTok. That's exactly what happened. Who's Poppin'? Damn those Russians. Rather than Google Chrome having a funny 5 minutes. Mark Biscuit, thanks, mate. Thanks for your support. You and Olena, give my love to Olena. For some Ukrainian wine for the little whiskey shop to be shared with your lovely wife. Raise your glasses high to the fact that soon Putin will be punished for thinking he could send slaves to liberate free people. Happy birthday, Mark and Olena. Thank you very much. My missus was like, what do you want for your birthday? And you get to a certain age where, like, well, I don't know, new pair of pants. I don't know. I have a very simple existence where I sit in this room and don't really move. But she is going to take me to cinema. Not tonight. We are going to go and watch I Swear, which is this Scottish film that is a true story about this guy who's campaigned for what's his name? Is it John Davison or something? Campaigns on Tourette's, right? He's one of these guys that has Tourette's and has a sweary version of Tourette's, and he was famous. I think there were documentaries made of him where people didn't understand Tourette's, and this is probably going back to the 80s, I think, where he would be swearing, saying really inappropriate things, and you know, it was horrible for him because everyone treated him as you could imagine. And he then started campaigning for Tourette's awareness and has done amazing things. Anyway, like one of my sons basically has Tourette's. He has transient tics. He doesn't have vocal tics, which is great, but he does have transient tics, and they are a challenge. And so I thought that'd be a really interesting film to watch, but it looks like it's going to be amazing. It's called I Swear. And I was looking at the IMDb ratings on it, and they're all like 10, 9. People like, this is the best film I've ever seen in my life. That kind of thing. And so I'm really excited to see that, because I think it might have a bit of purchase for me in terms of, having some very small experience of Tourette's, but also knowing the guy that it's about. So anyway, but thank you for your birthday wishes there. We're going to have a meal tonight and whatnot. And yes, so I appreciate your support, Mark. It's really, really generous. And yeah, as I say, give my love to Olena. Prapta, happy birthday. Thanks from Canada. Thank you very much, Prapta. Really appreciate that, mate. Mr. Lion Dust, good to have you on board. We need to bring local media back. So this is really important. So I don't know what that was in response to, Mr. Lion Dust, but this is a super important thing. So media is dying. I actually, I do subscribe to The Guardian, and I know you'll say, oh, left wing, blah, 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 but I made a conscious decision to make sure I support a mainstream media outlet, because otherwise, if we don't, they will die. And we'll end up just getting all of our information off the internet from people like me. But I require mainstream media to exist to get like some decent reporting getting done. If no one's going out there to do reporting, then it will just be some kind of regurgitating of online rumors. We need there to be a viable mainstream media. So don't just sit there and insult mainstream media. We need to support mainstream media, but also hold it to account when they don't do a good enough job. So I do support The Guardian, and I would, these things cost money, right? And so, but it's important, because I use a lot of articles, and they can't get by on just advertising alone. And I don't go and buy newspapers. Nobody really buys newspapers under the age of 50 anymore, really. And we get it online. So we do need to keep supporting that. But the issue is local media, and local media have traditionally done loads of really good investigative journalism on the local scale. And local media is dying. Now, I know there are some organizations and setups around the world where funding gets sent to local media to support them when they are unsupportable, or not unsupportable, when they are unviable in terms of their economic models. But they're so important to still exist that we need the work to be done, because media holds people to account. If you're not holding people from a local political point of view or local news point of view to account, they can be local business leaders, local politicians. If you're not holding national politicians and international politicians and leaders to account, then people don't get held to account, and they get away with anything. We need to understand media as an absolutely vital component of a functioning democracy. And so you find, honestly, this happens a lot. Timothy Snyder talks about this a lot. He says, support media. Pick a newspaper and support it. And he's not the only analyst and historian and whatnot. He's not the only commentator that says this. A lot of people advocate for supporting mainstream media or local media. Just we need to do it. Now, it costs, but like we used to buy newspapers, and that cost, right? So now I subscribe to The Guardian, so I have its app, and that's that's my thing. I'd like to do more. Sometimes I think, you know, New York Times or some sort of big American entity that whole, and I think the Washington Post, but then that's Jeff Bezos, and no, the New York Times at least is still trying to, you know, it's being taken to court by Trump, although the lawsuit was thrown out as being basically sort of not so much frivolous, it was just a really badly written lawsuit. Yeah, it's just really important. So we need to bring local media back. Means a lot to me, actually, as a statement there. Petra Olsen, happy birthday. Thank you, Petra. Really appreciate you being on board with your Swedish awesomeness. Will Planetzer, thank you for the ATP Geopolitics membership. I really appreciate that. BME, here's a little something for a tipple for your birthday. Thank you very much, BME. You're always very, very generous. Michael Viewchart, Ledge, as you know you are, gifted 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, Michael. Super generous always. And I haven't worn, I did wear my Canadian t-shirt the other day that you got me, so thank you. He runs this like retro clothing shop in Canada, and he sent me a couple of boxes of clothing. That's where I haven't worn them for some time, but we're getting into winter, so I'll put on some of the Canadian ice hockey tops that he sent me and other apparel. So thank you, mate. I don't thank you enough for that. Kevin Forst, just always so cool. Thank you, Kevin, a legend. Grunge thing, thoughts related to Mordor. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have announced they will immediately withdraw from the International Criminal Court. Wow. Right. Okay. Thanks, Ronnie. That's interesting. They are the three of the nations that routinely vote with Russia in the UN. Thank you to Rob C. Really appreciate that, Rob. Thank you, mate. Birthday drink for the Tippler. Thank you, my man. Are you also happy with the fall of the Wilders government in the Netherlands? The far right is showing their incompetence, says Grunching again. So I need to look into the details of this. I knew it fell, but it's what happens next and which side gets more of a momentum. And whether this will lead people to side more with Wilders just on its own rather than have a larger coalition, or I don't think it will. So I think it is going to show a failure of the Wilders government. This is often what I talk about, that you let these governments actually form rather than stifle them and stop them from forming at any given opportunity by having these complex coalitions to frustrate the far right, in this case, from getting in. But the problem is they never get in, and people never experience whether they're any good at ruling or not. And so they just actually get more popular. Whereas there is this idea that you need to lance the boil, which is to let them rule. Then you understand how crap they are. Then everyone goes, oh, yeah, they really were crap. And then they don't get voted in again. And that could be what has happened to some degree with Wilders in the Netherlands. Thank you, Tahir from Norway. Always very supportive. I really appreciate that, mate. Thank you. Paul Guda Deberitz, some ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thanks, Paul. Super generous. And finally, almost finally, F. Oink saying something in Hungarian. Yo napot kivanok. I have no idea what that means. Here's my ATP media support. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I am. I'm not a news. I'm a news aggregator, but the news has to be there for me to aggregate it. So that's why it's so important that it's there. Helga from Norway says, congratulations on your birthday, JP. Thank you very much. Thank you, Helga. And Sabrin, Matt Bishop, we need to have another live, Matt. Happy birthday, JP. You're catching up to me. And don't worry, when you get to my old age, you will realize it was all BS so have fun while you can. That's it. If only my legs worked. Has really stopped me having most of my fun. But if my legs really worked, I wouldn't be sitting here for as long as I do talking to you guys. I don't like walking because I can't walk very well because of my MS. And because I can't walk very well, my legs get worse and it's this vicious cycle. Yeah, otherwise I'll be out there. I'll probably still be managing my boys' football team and coaching their rugby. But anyway, whatever. Okay, let's go on to a bit of American stuff now. This was announced. So the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, wants all service commanders and their senior enlisted advisors to come to Quantico on short notice. It's difficult to understand why. This is potentially very, very important. I don't know when this is happening, but some people are calling this out as being very dangerous, calling your entire armed forces staff together in one place. It's like a security nightmare. Some people are saying he's going to purge them. Some people are saying he's going to announce war on Venezuela. A lot of this talk on Venezuela, will not talk, blowing up those Venezuelan boats. Many people are understanding that as an attempt to goad Venezuela into doing something military that allows the US to go to war with military. They want to get rid of Maduro. Then you've seen these videos. There's a famous video that went viral of women with guns being trained on how to do military stuff, and there's that really large woman running around with a gun and everyone's kind of taking a mickey. But it's the idea that Venezuela's kind of worrying, that they're starting to train up civilians in arms, and now you've got Pete Hegseth calling the entire armed forces together. Just incredible that he's done that. Now, if that is about Venezuela, then that's worrying, because I thought Trump was supposed to be the president of peace. Doesn't seem to be the case, does it? Or it could be to purge, and that's super worrying. We'll have to wait and see. Shashank Joshi here saying this is over James Comey, so the former FBI director. Red lights are flashing for American democracy again, says the New York Times, when a former FBI director is indicted solely because the president is angry with his investigations. Quote, the indictment filed in Alexandria, Virginia, came over the objection of career prosecutors. In other words, prosecutors like, don't do this. It's a crap case and it's politically motivated. And he's like, yeah, don't care, doing it. It's a super worrying thing, because it's the sort of thing you would expect to see if you were living in a dictatorship. Now, just very briefly on the Jimmy Kimmel thing. Jimmy Kimmel came back, had a show that I think had a beautifully poignant yet funny yet incisive monologue. I thought from his point of view and his writer's point of view, that was really well crafted. And then the next one, I've watched all three monologues the last 3 days, and they've all been very good. But this is what happened when Jimmy Kimmel came back. And this, again, if you're talking about dictatorship, this is what you'd expect if you were listening to someone that wanted to be a dictator. Donald Trump says, I can't believe ABC fake news gave Jimmy Kimmel his job back. The White House was told by ABC that his show was cancelled. My doorbell's just gone. I need to just tell my son to go and answer it. Finn, the doorbell's just gone. Can you answer it? I'm alive. Yeah. Quick run. Sorry about that. I can't believe ABC fake news gave Jimmy Kimmel his job back. The White House was told by ABC that his show was cancelled. Something happened between then and now, because his audience is gone and his talent was never there. Why would they want someone back who does so poorly, who's not funny, and who puts the network in jeopardy by playing 99% positive Democrat garbage? He is yet another arm of the DNC, and to the best of my knowledge, that would be a major illegal campaign contribution. So this is where it gets worrying, because he's singling out someone who is obviously pro-Democrat here, while not singling out Fox News, that is the propaganda arm of the GOP. And he's saying that is illegal. He's saying, to the best of my knowledge, him being a major arm of the DNC is an illegal campaign contribution. He then says, I think we're going to test ABC out on this. So now he's going to test them out. So this is going to be another attempt to shut Kimmel down. Let's see how we do, he says. Last time I went after them being ABC, them being Disney, last time I went after them, they gave me $16 million. This one sounds even more lucrative. A true bunch of losers. Let Jimmy Kimmel rot in his bad ratings. Well, actually, let him rot in his bad ratings, but don't shut him down. If you shut him down, you're a dictator. And anyway, his ratings aren't bad. They've gone through the roof, thanks to you, by the way. They've gone absolutely through the roof. Now, if you have a president that is saying we're going to go after them and it's going to be personally lucrative for me, you have someone who in broad daylight is admitting to corruption, grifting, and dictatorial desires. Again, I ask anyone who's supportive of Donald Trump to come on and justify that. Anyone who's supportive of Donald Trump and freedom of speech, try and justify that statement. That statement is absolutely insane. It is horrendous. It's that bad. Honestly, it is that bad. And then just to kind of remind ourselves a little bit of the kind of Charlie Kirk situation, and then we had a shooting, and I should really do a video on this, but again, we don't. Right, what I find very, very interesting at the moment is that you had a shooter that killed Jimmy Kimmel, and by the way, I've been watching some, going down some conspiracy theory rabbit holes because I've seen a bunch of videos on the people who rushed to Charlie Kirk's body. And they grabbed things off the table, put it in their pockets, and then took it out of their pockets and gave it to someone else. And literally, as blood was like flowing out of this guy's neck, there were people around him who were doing really dodgy things straight away that need explaining. There's some videos that really, honestly, need explaining. And I'm not this sort of person. I'm actually anti-conspiracy theory. But I've seen some really weird. I've seen a video of the frames of his death. And the hole in his neck takes place a frame after there is a hole in the pagoda, in the gazebo behind him. So the chronology goes hole there, hole in neck. And yet we're understanding that it's supposed to, the bullet's coming from the front. So it should go hole in the neck, then hole behind. So like, well, that needs explaining. All these weird things. I'm not saying they're all true, but or whatever. But like weird stuff went on at Charlie Kirk's assassination that just doesn't make sense. And now you've had Kash Patel, the FBI leader, come out and say we are investigating where the shot came from. So they don't even know where the shot came from. So they had straight away. It's like this guy shot. He shot from there. He was saying, blah, blah. But then you're like, well, how did he put his gun in his? It's a really difficult gun to undo. Like everyone knows that who does those guns, to take apart and put in a case. But he took it apart, then put it back together, and took it apart, and he got dressed twice, and he did this, and like none of this makes sense. Everyone claimed he was this sort of person. Then he's then come out, and there's now I think he's denying stuff, and then he wasn't this kind of person. Then everyone shut up about it because you would assume that if he was that kind of person, all of that information now be out there because Kash Patel be shouting about it, but they're not shouting about it. So there's just all that weirdness to do with Charlie Kirk's death. And then people are now talking about Erica Kirk, his wife, and connections she had to Trump and pageants and Romania and Israel and all sorts of weird stuff with his wife. And so you've got all these crazy conspiracy theories. So then you've got the far right, like Alex Jones and people now saying, well, actually, there's a cover up going on, blah, 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 blah. But we're not hearing of what you think we would hear about, which is from if he really was this like leftist nut job that took out Charlie Kirk, we would have heard about that now, surely from friends, from relatives, from evidence that's clearly out there, because it would be in the best interest of like Fox News and the right to throw that out there. But it's gone quiet, just like when the guy at Butler shot Donald Trump in his ear. We know virtually nothing about that guy now. And that's what, a year later? Like what? So they shouted about that as being the left doing this. Then it turns out that he wasn't on the left. The guy that shot him in Butler, and he had, you know, Republican parents, and then he seemed to be his friends at school were saying actually he was like saying pro-Trump things and stuff. So you're like, okay, what's going on there? And it turns out he wanted to kill Joe Biden as well. And so that's gone silent. We hear nothing about him. Then you've got Charlie Kirk, and in the 5 days after that, everyone's like, this is all the left, this is all the left, blah, blah, blah. But then there's silence on that. And then Kash Patel's come out and said, we are genuinely investigating why, you know, planes had their transponders turned off and why this happened and the angle of the shooter and what happened in these videos. So they are looking at all those things. Then you had the ICE shooter the other day where somebody shot 3 people. All 3 were detainees of ICE. And I talked immediately about this, but I probably shouldn't have said something so quickly. But they weren't ICE agents who were shot, but it doesn't mean he wasn't trying to shoot ICE. That the claim is, and I don't know the details, but the claim from the right is he shot through dark windows into a car, an ICE car, and then killed loads of detainees, or 2 detainees, and injured another one. And then they found these bullets that just said, so the bullets weirdly said a bullet said anti-ICE. And like, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that not really, really weird? So if I was going to shoot someone and I was trying to write something on a bullet, I don't think I would write an adjective anti-ICE. I would write something like F Nazis or F fascists or F ICE. Anti-ICE, like this bullet is an anti-ICE bullet. Like I don't know. It's just such a weird thing to write, and it's just scrawled on there. And I don't want to be all conspiracy theory, but this looks exactly like if someone wanted to make this look like a particular person has done it, has suddenly, come across the bullets and written on there really quickly this, and then said, look what we found. I don't know, but that sounds kind of conspiracy thinking. Just like, it just wouldn't be the sort of thing I would write on there. So anyway, you've now got, straight away, you had Kash Patel, Chrissy Nern, and JD Vance come out and then again accuse this of being an issue of the left doing this. And then it's gone silent again on this guy. And now we know nothing about this guy other than what open source intelligence people are finding out. So we're going to return to this idea. But you've got here JD Vance talking about the rhetoric being responsible.
We got to stop it. We got to condemn it. And that starts, unfortunately, at the very top of the Democratic Party. If you want to stop political violence, stop attacking our law enforcement as the Gestapo. If you want to stop political violence, stop telling your supporters that everybody who disagrees with you is a Nazi. If you want to stop political violence, look in the mirror. That's the way that we stop political violence in this.
Which sounds quite reasonable, right? Until you understand that he called Donald Trump a Nazi. Like the lack of self-awareness here. Well, this is what JD Vance said. Trump is the fruit of the party's collective neglect. I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical asshole like Nixon, who wouldn't be that bad and might even prove useful, or that he's America's Hitler. How's that for discouraging? Just insane. Like the things that JD Vance have said, like even Fox News reported on this, back before the election, as he was touted to be VP, because he said might be America's Hitler, might be a cynical. Well, he didn't say might, by the way. He didn't say might. That was them adding that. Cultural heroin, noxious and reprehensible. I'm never a Trump guy. Never liked him. Terrible candidate. Idiot if you voted for him. But the idea that we've got to stop calling people Hitler when he called Trump Hitler, America's Hitler, is just rank hypocrisy. Mehdi Hassan said, I have no idea who shot at ICE facility or why, and hard to trust this FBI director. Murder is always inexcusable and unjustifiable. Now, the idea that people are mad at ICE because of Democrats' rhetoric and not because of daily videos of masked ICE agents assaulting people, including citizens, is for the birds. So the idea that people are shooting because Democrats are using some harsh rhetoric against Republicans, and Republicans are doing that against Democrats, but you're cherry picking Democrats doing that against Republicans, rather than the torrent of videos that we're seeing, and I'm seeing them every day, of ICE. There was one in an immigration court where an ICE guy double-handed through a woman who was complaining about her husband being arrested, threw her against the wall and down onto her feet, and then pushed her again afterwards. And you're like, this is happening every day. That's why people are getting angry, because ICE are doing things without due process. Anyway, going back to this guy, the ICE shooter, the guy called Joshua Yarn. Again, Klippenstein has, oops, no, wrong one. Ken Klippenstein has released another article like he did before on the shooter on Tyler Robinson, talking to his friends. And it turns out that the similarities between Tyler Robinson and this guy are really, really obvious. They're both online, terminally online people. And this guy, even more so than Robertson. Robertson was seen as a nice guy, according to his friends, right? He's obviously shot Charlie Kirk. Well, I say he's obviously, some people are saying he didn't shoot Charlie Kirk. But anyway, assuming he shot Charlie Kirk, he was seen as like a nice guy who was friendly enough, if a little quiet. So we can't understand why he shot Charlie Kirk, blah, blah, blah. And this guy, on the other hand, was more of a loner, what's called edgelord. Now, edgelords, that's an online term for people who are living on places like 4chan, who are like... So straight away, Cash Patel says, while the investigation is ongoing, an initial review of the evidence shows an ideological motive behind his attack. And they're, President Trump responded because shooting, blaming the radical left, vowing to sign another executive order to dismantle what he called democratic terrorism networks, and that Antifa was a domestic terrorist organization, blah, 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 blah. So there was all this massive reaction, but so none of his former friends, so this guy's interviewed some of his friends and said none of his former friends believed that anti-ICE inscription could possibly be sincere, feeling such a serious political statement was anathema to who Jan was. His humor was deeply ironic, often offensive and aggressive to the point of alienation. On the off chance the shooting wasn't what it looked like, I reached out to people who knew the gunman, 29-year-old Joshua Jan. 3 who knew him since at least middle school agreed to speak to me on condition that I did not name them, corroborating their friendship with photos and other records. Their accounts paint the picture of someone with a hugely libertarian bent who despised both major parties and politicians generally, including Trump. So he does despise Trump, but all politicians, but who didn't engage with politics beyond that. He preferred edgy humor, video games, and a message board 4chan, all of which he became increasingly steeped in as he withdrew from social life, as well as their own friendship several years ago, they said. Quote, he was most certainly an edgelord, an irony guy, one friend said. Edgelord is an online speak for someone who likes to espouse edgy nihilistic views. Asked about the inscription on a bullet, the friend said Josh was an edgelord who wanted someone to get blamed. I think he tried his best to write something goofy to rile people up. Another friend showed me a Facebook post describing how Jan had flooded his friends' comment sections with rape jokes. Quote, playful shock humor, the friend said. Jan's profile on the gaming platform Stream showed the vast amounts of time he spent playing video games, particularly shooters. More than 6,000 hours on Rust, 3,000 on Team Fortress 2, and 1,000 on Left 4 Dead 2. He even found time to play 3.5 hours in the past 2 weeks, the account shows. So on and so forth. So I'm not going to go massively into this, but you can find elements. Well, in fact, let's read some more of this. Among the dozen or so usernames he used was one reading hashtag impeachment. When I asked if this wasn't a clear reference to anti-Trump politics, his friends recoiled at the idea he would express opposition to Trump so sincerely and straightforwardly. Instead, they saw it as part of his broader, ironic persona, poking fun at anti-Trump resistance types. That said, one friend recalled that when Trump first came to power, Jan was not a fan, though he had contempt for mainstream politicians in general. His friends say he had more of a libertarian bent, with one recalling an interest in the libertarian figure Ron Paul. Still, the friend who recounted Jan's dislike of Trump insisted that there was at least a kernel of seriousness to the username. Quote, if it was ironic, it's that half irony when you're half kidding, half serious, just in case, he said. He was never really into politics, especially not politicians, said another friend who had known him since 8. Quote, he was into politics only in a 4chan sense, contrarian, provocative, boundary pushing for laughs, not conviction. 4chan, the anonymous message board where provocation and irony are the coin of the realm, was apparently one of Jan's favourite haunts. His abrasive humour is where his friends' opinions on him diverge the most, with some describing it as amusing, but others as grating, especially as his online persona bled into real life. Quote, I mostly stopped talking to him when he took his 4chan irony stuff into daily interactions. He was becoming unbearable. Once he dropped out of college, he had no obligation to be social, and none of us reached out due to his edgelord behavior. I wasn't able to find anyone who, with insight into Jan's more recent views, something that friends said was unsurprising given his withdrawal from social life over the past few years. Quote, if you're having trouble finding people besides immediate family who knew him, that's part of the story, one friend said. Every mutual friend drifted away over that kind of edgelord behavior. And so on and so forth, and videos of him on YouTube and blah blah blah. So it's probably quite complex with this guy, and that doesn't feed into either side's desires to see this guy as either left wing or right wing. And that's probably why we haven't heard much from Kash Patel. Like, I'm sure if something was obvious, like if he had Facebook pages where he's a member of the DNC appreciation fan club on Facebook, then that would have been leaked. Absolutely no doubt that if he was overtly one side or the other, it would have been leaked. But it's complex. So it's probably the case that Trump's shooter in Butler, the shooter of Charlie Kirk, and this shooter appear to be, I don't know about the first guy, but online people who are living in a screwed up modern world where nihilism seems to be a facilitator of horrific acts. So yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you think. Right, just moving on briefly. Again, talking about how strong Trump is, right, and that he almost couldn't cope with the escalator that all of a sudden stopped. You've got this. Trump supporters online now, they're so, oh my God, Trump is carrying around 8 pizzas like it's nothing. Biden would faceplant with more than 2. Really? Are we being amazed at Trump now because he can carry 8 pizzas? We're pizza scaling presidents now. Oh, he's an 8 pizza man, though. Yeah, but I would have thought, would he have been a 9 pizza president? Just honestly, get over it. Right. Last bit's going to be broadly on economy, and it's going to be fairly quick, so don't worry. This is super, 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 super scary if you are interested in economic flourishing of the US. In quick succession, you have 3 statements from Trump here. In order to protect our great heavy truck manufacturers from unfair outside competition, I will be imposing, as of October the 1st, 2025, a 25% tariff on heavy big trucks made in other parts of the world. Therefore, our great large truck company manufacturers, such as Peterbilt, Kenworth, Freightliner, Mack Trucks, and others, will be protected from the onslaught of outside interruptions. We need our truckers to be financially healthy and strong for many reasons, but above all else for national security purposes. So, tariffs. Okay, fair enough. Maybe strategic tariffs in the truck domain. Not even 20 minutes later, and I guess we're doing 50% tariffs on IKEA for some reason. He's a man with a plan to make life more expensive than he can't, and he can't be stopped, says Geopolitical. Okay, so what's he saying next? We will be imposing a 50% tariff on all kitchen cabinets, bathroom vanities, and associated products starting October the 1st. Additionally, we will be charging a 30% tariff on upholstered furniture. The reason for this is the large-scale flooding of these products into the United States by other countries, outside countries. It is a very unfair practice, but we must protect, for national security and other reasons, our manufacturing process. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Wow, okay, but it didn't stop there. And then we hear, starting October the 1st, 2025, we'll be imposing a 100% tariff on any branded or patented pharmaceutical product, unless a company is building their pharmaceutical manufacturing plant in America. Is building will be defined as breaking ground and or under construction. There will therefore be no tariff on these pharmaceutical products if construction is started. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I think that might affect the UK because there was thinking that there was going to be some UK pharmaceutical exemptions and stuff. So it's just going like tariff. And all these tariffs will do is make it more expensive for Americans. It is a tax on the electorate, on the consumer. He is not doing well on his polling at the moment, just full stop, but with the economy and with inflation particularly. And then you get this. So he's tariffing everyone and everything. And he's basically China, because of the trade war with the US and the tariffs, has stopped buying soybeans. So China, it appears, buys all of America's soybeans. And they're not buying a single soybean off the US, like 0, right? And the Americans can't sell it to anyone else. There was another guy I showed you a recording of recently who had a different, I can't forget, it was a weird crop I'd never heard of. He says, all of this goes to China and no one else will buy this. It's really particular stuff. No one else will buy this. So I now have to cut this down and throw it on the ground. This is now being mulched into the earth. I have lost all of my money for this crop. And China is now buying, I think, from Argentina. And by the way, Trump is just bailing out Argentina. So the Trump administration bails out Argentina under Javier Milei because he's his mate. He's an anarcho-capitalist. He wants to rip up government and civil service, but also lots of Trump's mates have investments in bonds and, I don't know, all sorts to do with Argentina. So anyway, he's bailing out Argentina. Meanwhile, Argentina are providing soybeans to China in the absence of the US. It's just ridiculous positioning. Anyway, Trump is now going to, as he did in Trump 1.0, so he started a trade war with China. China didn't buy soybeans, and then he had to pay his soybean producers $12 billion. $12 billion because they'd lost out because of his decision to put tariffs on. Then he says, look at how much money the tariffs have made. And then other people are like, really? Because it looks like you've given all of that money from the tariffs that you made to the people who suffered because you put the tariffs on. A completely pointless situation. Ron Filipkowski says Trump doesn't get to give some of the tariff money to farmers. The tariff money is in the US Treasury, not a Trump slush fund. Congress has to approve taxpayer dollars to put farmers on welfare, although Trump should pay it out of his crypto profits since he caused it. And now you've got, but they're so freaking beholden to Trump. This is Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who used to be the press secretary under Trump 1.0. Her father is the ambassador to Israel, and she is running for whatever. Here is what she said. In like selling, paying off farmers as a good thing. I spoke with President Donald Trump this morning about immediate relief for our farmers and so grateful for his leadership to help save our agricultural community. His leadership is why they're screwed, you absolute dimwit. Like, that's ridiculous. Again, it's like trying to congratulate Trump for putting out the fire that he freaking started. He's the arsonist and the firefighter. And you're saying, what an amazing firefighter he is. Look at how well he's put out the fire that he started himself. You absolute idiot. Anyway, quote, a nation that can't feed itself can't survive. No, and it can't survive on feeding itself because Trump put tariffs on, you idiots. And no one understands that or does more to support farmers than President Trump is the most stupid thing she could say. What an absolute plonker. Sarah Huckabee Sanders, come and speak to me. Let's have a debate about whether no one does more to support farmers than the president that's put tariffs on China to stop China buying America's farm produce. That no one supports farmers as much as the president that bails out Argentina, who's providing the alternative for your American farm product. Why do we live in an upside down world? As this source says, old enough to remember when Sarah Huckabee Sanders said Arkansas will never ask for federal handouts because people in Arkansas will pull themselves up by their bootstraps. Guess she forgot that and loves federal socialism now. This is socialism that apparently the Republicans despise. Now they espouse it. I just don't get it. I don't get it. Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, that's brilliant. Gary Kroger, Sanders has her own podium for a debate, JP, lol. For those of you who don't know the reference there, she was rightfully done for an expenses scandal that involved her. This is, how sad am I as a British person that knows this? She basically put a podium that was $9,000, if I remember correctly, $9,000 podium through her books. And basically it was corruption. She was claiming for a lectern, for a podium, that was just, it was literally, she should no longer have a job, but she does, of course she does. And yeah, I don't know what happened in the end to that, but I think it has all been outed. The open source people went through her books and whatnot. And yeah, so you should go and look into Sarah Huckabee Sanders and her $9,000 lectern that she made a claim for, which I think was helping one of her friends as well. I think it was even worse than just, yeah. That's brilliant. Okay, so now we're going to go to something else that I think is incredibly dodgy. So Mikey Sherrill is running in a governor's race for New Jersey against, what's his name, Citrinelli? Is that right? Is it Citrinelli? I can't see it. Anyway, I think she's running against a Republican, Citrinelli, and they're really close. It's a really close race. And the government has just helped him out a treat by actually, hopefully it doesn't help him out. Hopefully it backfires. Just doing really a horrific thing of doxing Mikey Sherrill. So the Trump administration has released Representative Mikey Sherrill's full military files to her GOP opponent in this year's New Jersey governor's race, potentially violating federal privacy laws. Something worth looking into. I'm not going to go into it at the moment. Documents included Cheryl's social security number, which appears on almost every page, Cheryl's performance evaluations, and the non-disclosure agreement between her and the US government to safeguard classified information. The American government released that so that Citrinelli could get some advantage over her, like opposition, Oppo research or whatever. Just absolutely insane. And the last thing I'm going to say is just on economics. Just watch out. The UK's now, our wealth inequality in the UK, I think, is second only to the US. So we've gone really in the US direction. The US has gone in that direction big time. And one indicator of this, as Robert Reich says, the CEO to worker pay ratio. And by the way, this is actually legislated for in, I don't know if it's in all Nordic nations. So there's some interesting correlations / causations. You can debate about what is a correlation, what's a causation here. But it's thought that it's not thought that this. We know that the Nordic nations routinely finish in the top of the World Global Happiness Index. And part of this is to do with a number of things it is thought. One is trust in institutions. I talked about this the other day. We need to trust our institutions more, because then the more you distrust them, the more you want to burn them down, and the more you become a populist, and it's really dangerous. And some of that trust is being eroded often falsely, as in from disinformation from ne'er-do-wells, especially from abroad. We need to really watch out for that. So trust in institutions, the welfare state from the Nordic nations, which is very good, and it gives you a safety net, which means you don't have existential you don't go through an existential crisis when you lose your job, and actually, you have that reliance, you have that knowledge that you're going to be looked after and get yourself another job and blah, blah, blah. And then a whole bunch of things. But one other thing they do in the Nordic nations is they regulate for the difference between your CEO and your worker. And so that it can only be like that much rather than that much. And actually, it's thought that happiness is somewhat connected to wealth inequality as well. And when you get like supremely rich people, then, and a lot of poverty, then there's a lot of resentment, then there's a lot of unhappiness. And what's that saying about Americans? Every American is a frustrated millionaire. The problem with Americans is that everyone thinks they can be a millionaire. And because they think they can be a millionaire, they genuinely think that there is a chance I can do it. Even though I've got this job that's paying the same amount and I'm working 60 hours a week, and I'm, my chances, so I'm going to get a lottery ticket. So I'm going to do that. Yeah. But the idea is that the American dream is so pervasive that many people just think that but by the grace of God go I. That could be me. I could be the one that could be a millionaire. And as a result of that thinking, they actually very often don't put things in place to stop massive wealth accumulating in the very top, because they think that could be me. So it's the idea that the top 1% in the US, or what all the different figures, like the top 4 people own like 50% of American wealth or whatever it is. I don't know. Those nuts figures that are just like show the insane wealth disparity and the accumulation of wealth over time in the top few people. Whereas, other countries realize that that's quite dangerous for public health. And actually, it's not that we should be communist and everyone have an equity, but there should be equality of opportunity. But also, let's not allow that to just go so far. Let's not allow capitalism to go so far that it becomes dangerous and these rich people then have power. So then we're going to cycle back. Isn't this nice? This is the last tab I have. I'm going to go back to the very first tab I have. I love it when this happens. I love it. because this is a mistake, but it is not, because I talk about all the same kind of stuff. The richest man on earth owns Twitter. The second richest man on earth is about to be the major owner of TikTok. The third richest man, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. The fourth, Washington Post. Then you got Rupert Murdoch, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. And we're living in a society where we kind of, or I think Americans and to some degree the British now are living in societies where we really like seeing rich people get really rich, and we love them opulently showing us their wealth because we think that could be us. And we genuinely think we could actually have a chance of being that person while there's a snowball's chance in hell of that actually happening. Robert Rice says the CEO to worker pay ratio in 1965 was 20-1. So a CEO would earn on average 20 times more than the lowest paid worker. Then in 1990, some 25 years later, that was up at 75-1. So it had gone up by almost 4 times. And then in today's terms, the CEO to worker ratio is 280-1. I wrote an article once called On Billionaires. It was about the justification of billionaires. Like people like, oh, we can't put a wealth tax on because blah. It's like, I don't think you realize how much a billion is compared to a million. Like what's the stat which is being verified? The stat was something like, and this is based on 2015 figures, something like that. So when Jeff Bezos had probably $100 billion less. The claim was it's either $5,000 or $10,000. It's like if you earned, let's say $5,000, if you earned $5,000 a day from when was the US founded, 1482? If you earned $5,000 a day from 1482, every single day of every single year until now, you still wouldn't have $1 billion. That's $5,000 a day for 500 years plus. Like, and you still would earn less than Jeff Bezos was accumulating in a week. In a week, 550 years of $5,000 a day, and you still be earning less than Jeff Bezos accumulated in a week. So, like, we don't quite realize how big a billion is. It's interesting when you look at time. You're like, 1 million seconds is this long. 1 billion seconds is this long. It's just like phenomenally larger, right? And so we go about justifying billionaires having money. So what is it they've found? It was like if you took the billions away from billionaires and left them with $1 billion. So everyone's still got $1 billion. There's plenty enough to be getting on with, right? You've got £1 billion, right? You're rich. You're super rich. Yeah. You took all the billions from all the billionaires. You'll be able to solve world hunger for 282 years. So is it morally acceptable that billionaires maintain themselves as billionaires and then increase their wealth at the expense of other people? That wealth is extracted from society, right? We are paying for their wealth. You and I, all of us are paying for their wealth. I paid more tax than Jeff Bezos did, than Amazon did in the UK in, I don't know what the situation was, but 3 years ago, I think they pay no tax in the UK. How is it that Amazon, owned by one of the richest people in the world, pays no tax, and me, I pay more tax than him, than them? Like, so something needs to happen. Nothing has ever trickled down. It's an extraction system, and I'm not advocating some kind of like communist revolution, but just something is broken when there is that much money accumulated in that few number of people. And those people own all the megaphones that would try and correct that situation. All the megaphones are owned by the people whose vested interest in those megaphones is to keep those megaphones from telling you the information that would stop that from coming about. We're moving into scary times, not just in terms of war, but in terms of information control. 1984 style, and I do really, really worry, and that's why I keep banging on about it day in, day out. Anyway, that's enough from me. Right. Okay. So what do I have to say to you in terms of thanks? Well, many of you have been super generous. I know it's my birthday. Thank you. Happy birthday, sir. Thank you for your daily work. Have a wonderful day. Slava Ukraini. Indeed. Heroin Slava. Levko Koval. Thank you, Levko. Really appreciate that. AJ Simo, not for Yorkshire tea, but for the birthday falling down juice. That, mate, I don't need that to make me fall down. If I didn't have, so a couple of years ago, a year ago, I think it was, or so, we got new carpets downstairs, new carpets in most of the house, because we bought the house in 2014, and then 2024, 10 years later, those carpets were threadbare. So we've got new carpets, and we've got quite thick carpets, just because my partner wanted them, and carpets are expensive, so it was quite an outlay, and it was a big thing for us to do. But I've fallen down so many times in this house on those carpets, and those carpets have saved. I fell down just there last year. You will remember I fractured my elbow. Some of you that have been with me for a long time will remember I fractured my elbow because I fell down on the bloody laminate flooring or wherever it is. Don't fall down on the carpets. I am in trouble. Anyway, yeah, falling down juice. I don't need juice to help me do that. That's for sure. Thanks, mate. Right, I was chatting with my buddy, says Ignis, in the Marines last night. He's been reading some open source intelligence, high likelihood of war soon. Ooh, yeah, there is a lot of talk about this. I think what's going on in Venezuela is a real move to unseat Maduro there. Yeah. Happy birthday, young man, or my condolences on getting even older. Yeah, Mitch. Apparently, it happens to us all. Well, and sadly, unless you die, let's not bring it down. Julian Rosser, thank you. That's really, 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 really kind. You should have Yorkshire Tea as a sponsor for your channel. You know, you're right. Fun fact, had a job interview as a tea taster in Harrogate years ago. Harrogate is a big tea place. A lass used to smoke, and the two ciggies I had prior killed my taste buds. Didn't get the job. Ah, Julian, there you go. Oh, sorry to hear that. Oh, well, thank you very much, Julian. And hopefully your job situation now is even more productive than tea tasting. But what can be more productive than tea tasting? Getting the very best. I don't think, well, to be honest, Yorkshire tea it's found the best. There's no other tea that you need. Ex-Penguin 95, thanks, mate. If calling the right Nazis, why is it okay for them to call the left radical communists and socialists? Double standards. This is exactly true, Ex-Penguin. And also, Trump does this thing where he says, the radical left, they are, or Kamala Harris, she is radical communist, socialist, fascist. You're like, you literally can't be all of those things. He's just like a playground bully that's just found some new words to insult people with. This is ridiculous. Anyway, that's enough for me. It's been a very long one. Take care, everybody. This was my birthday one. I really appreciate your support. It means an awful lot to me. Thank you so much. And please remember, as Cheryl is so good at reminding us, that there is a Car for Ukraine Autumn Harvest ATP landing page that you can find out there, or atpgeo.com/donate. You'll be taken to here. Not there. You'll be taken to here. No, you won't. You'll be taken to here. Goodness me, get it right. Autumn Harvest, ATP Geopolitics. Thank you so much for those who have donated. We've got stuck on just over one truck. Any other help here would be very gratefully received. Thank you for Thomas Davis and Rolf Wolfer and Julian Rossiter and Cheryl Waitley, of course, as I've thanked before. Thank you to everyone who's contributed. Any more would be gratefully received. Thanks to the mods. Thanks to everyone. You're all great. I've got my mapping update ready to go, but I don't know if I'm going to have the energy to do it. But nonetheless, it is something that might come out later. And I will be producing Alexander Stubb's UN speech. Take care of yourselves and others, and Slava Ukraini, all the very best.